Order. Ian Lavery to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Henderson. As ever, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship as we discuss what is an incredibly important issue with regards to many constituents in my constituency of Warnsbeck and indeed in the wider southeast Northumberland. And I understand it might be complicated because I will be mentioning the different schools and different areas and towns and villages. But, you know, myself and my staff are always happy to discuss the geography with the Minister and his team following the debate. So at the outset, I think it's important, I want to put on record, Mr Henderson, that I want to thank the school leaders, I want to thank the trustees, school governors, the parents, the kids, everybody who's really worked extremely hard in my constituency, because for quite some time the school ratings, Ofsted ratings, haven't been really where they should be at. They're on the turn for the first time in quite some time. So I'm absolutely, I want to assure the people involved in the schools, in every part of the educational structure, that they have my full support and sincere thanks for turning the worm with regard to qualifications in the constituency. The well-being at the forefront of, as I say, turning around the fortunes of the children, because for far too long we've seen what can only be described as less than acceptable educational results. But the crux of the debate, of this debate, is the concept of parental choice in education, Minister. It's something that sounds so reasonable but has had a disastrous impact on some children. At the 2019 general election, the government pledged to continue to ensure that parents can choose the schools that best suit their children and best prepare them for the future. This is something that parents in South East Northumberland will consider with utter confusion. At the time that I've been a Member of Parliament, the system of education in South East Northumberland has largely been converted to a two-tier system from the three-tier system. I don't intend to make any comment on the effectiveness or of either form of the two or three-tier system. That's for another time. But certainly the change was opposed by many people, but implemented after consultation, and will not have been seen by those opposing it locally as upholding parental choice. The upshot of the changes was the closure of middle schools in some of the larger villages of South East Northumberland. Specifically, it meant that Newbegin by the Sea and Guidepost lost their middle schools. And it meant that children who would previously have been schooled in their community are now travelling to secondary schools in neighbouring towns at a much younger age. Parental choice in special educational settings is an incredibly important topic too. But again, I wouldn't intend to dwell on that today. It's a topic that deserves its own debate, and so certainly something which we can return to at a future date. Yes, of course.
I'm grateful to my great friend and obviously welcome you to the chair, Mr Henderson. I wonder if his constituency has an element of a population which is sparsely distributed. Mine's got 23 separate villages. There's probably 4 or 5 high schools. And so making a choice is limited by the geographic spread of the high schools, secondary schools especially. And I think that does impact on communities like his in the northeast and mine and elsewhere too. And in that respect, competition between secondary schools in academies is something which doesn't really necessarily help parental choice in his constituency.
Thanks for that intervention. And as my honourable friend says, it's basically the semi-rural, rural town, villages and small villages who have had children travelling, being used as feeder schools, travelling to certain schools for like years and years, decades and decades, and the parental choice now is being taken away from the parents. So that is a massive, massive issue. Basically, the crux of the debate which we have here today. Yes, go on.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Has he had the experience of some entrepreneurial secondary academies excluding kids who have got issues about attainment in the effort to drive up the average result for that school? And if so, what does he think happens to those children, those young people who've been excluded?
I think, again, that's a very important issue with regards to what's happened to a number of, should we say, allegedly problematic children in education. And it has proven to be a massive issue, certainly in my constituency, as it has probably across the piece. There is a reluctance, in my view, from some schools, some academies, to continue to educate young people without, basically trying to nurture them. Because a lot of these kids, I'm going to be talking with the day now, have got extreme difficulties, living in poverty, got problems, live in socially deprived areas, getting worse and worse. A lot of them are using, the parents are using food banks. A lot of these kids need somebody to put an arm around them. And I think a lot of them get, not a lot of them, but certainly a number of young children at a very young age get kicked into touch far too early by the different schools and academies right across the constituencies. Of course.
We don't really want too many multiple interventions from one member.
Are you saying, I absolutely take your guidance, but I haven't asked to speak, but there are a number of issues which he's raising which I think are a matter of national importance. If it's possible, with your forbearance, one final intervention, please. You are very generous, and we've got an hour and a half debate, and I know that my good friend here has probably got an 85-minute speech, so he's going to have to cut it down slightly. But I noticed that the results of the number of young people in his constituency with no qualifications at all is almost 1 in 5. In the City of London, only 6% have no qualifications at all. Is that a factor to do with social class, or does he think it's partly about the density of the population and the sparsity in his areas? Just to add a point, my own constituency, 24% of all the kids have no qualifications at all when they leave school. Isn't it a disgrace?
Thanks again for that intervention. And there was a number of questions in that intervention. And I know that Mr. Henderson's the chair, an excellent chair, but there's only one, James just come, there's only the Honourable Member for Strangford just come in. There's only 2 people in he's made 3 interventions. But I think it's really important to recognise that. And again, that's like part of what I wanted to discuss here today. It's about giving all children equal opportunity, equal choice, in schools where their parents went to, in schools where their friends are going to, who live up the street in the same street, who are going to different schools. It's all about trying to better the lives and the educational life of young people in the constituencies. And I know it's difficult because my honourable friend's constituency is very similar to mine. Areas with high population in lots of little areas on the outskirts which are much lower in terms of population. It does present problems, but regardless of party politics, parental choice in education is an incredibly reasonable ambition, but until all parents are able to exercise parental choice, it will remain only an ambition. In recent years, my office has been dealing with an increasing number of cases relating to children not able to access their school of choice. It's not because they have sought access schools in distant communities where they haven't any ties. Indeed, the schools they're now unable to access are those that, as I mentioned before, Mr. Henderson, it's the schools where their parents and their grandparents attended. And it was, if you were at that school, that's the next school, and that was a generational thing. And it's been absolutely smashed to pieces with the new rules that have come into place in terms of pupil allocation numbers, the PAN as it's described. You know, of course I will.
Mr. Chairman, congratulate the honourable gentleman for one spec for bringing this forward. He and I often are in debates in Westminster Hall on issues which are of interest to him and also to me as well. So I want to say really well done on bringing this forward. For the education, of course, of those in South East Northumberland, is no different from the education of those of my constituency of Strangford. But this debate is about South East Northumberland. Does the honourable member for Wanspec not agree that access to high-quality education is something that must be automatic, in other words, available for everyone, and that central government must assist local councils in areas with additional needs and numbers of teachers, and further that classroom aids and assistance are an essential help to getting as many children into mainstream education as possible? I often say it, Mr. Chairman, education is so vital for our children. Get them educated, and the future is open to them to achieve their many, many goals and dreams.
Thanks very much for that intervention. And it's so true. It's about proper, real, good education. And I think what you see is, certainly in my constituency, we've seen a number of schools turn the corner and now rated good, and rather than the not welcome ratings from Ofsted. And that focuses people's mind, it focuses parents' mind. So instead of just going to the school where they possibly wanted, they want to go to the school which is now rated good, if not better, and hopefully it will be better in the coming years. Everybody should want their children to be part of the best potential educational facilities and where the best results are attained, but in a really welcoming sort of environment as well. But I mentioned before that when I was a schoolboy, I was at Ashington High School, and it's now Ashington Academy. And there were two large cohorts used to be bussed into Ashington High School from Pegswood, which is about 2 miles away. And it was the same when my two sons attended the school. They experienced exactly the same. And as recently as 2018, of the 19 children leaving Pegswood, it's only 2 miles, if 1.5 miles away, of the 19 children leaving Pegswood Primary School, 19 were admitted to the Ashington Academy, 100%. And that's the way it had been for generations. But however, last year, 24 children left the school at the end of year 5, but only 14 were admitted to Ashington Academy. 9 found their way to a different town altogether, further away, 6 or 7 miles away, and there was one to Blythe Academy, which is even further afield. So you can see what has actually happened there. And in the years between, numbers attained in Ashington Academy is steadily reduced, with the destination of those not able to get a place varying greatly. So Pegswood Primary School is marginally closer to King Edward School in Morpeth. I can see the Minister can visualise this quite clearly. He's looking at a map. But the primary school Pegswood Primary School is marginally closer to the King Edward School in Morpeth. But as that system still includes middle schools and is itself regularly oversubscribed, it's just simply not an appropriate opportunity for kids to access education. What is, again, a very, very, very sought after school, King Edward's, known as Kevy. The reality of the situation is the splitting up of year groups, friendships, and children travelling further to attain a suitable school. The very same issue was in play at the Bedlington Academy. We've been dealing in my office with cases involving children from North Blythe, from Commons, from Choppington, from Guideburst and Stakeford, who have all been unable to obtain a place at the school. This was the natural school. We've spent many hours seeking a solution for a girl living in North Blythe, and I understand this. For those unfamiliar with the geography of the area, North Blythe is a small community on the north shore of the River Blythe, looking onto the town which shares its name with the river running in between. This girl has gone through a primary school that was formerly a feeder school to both Bedlington Academy and its predecessor, Bedlington Community High School. And by any reasonable measure, given that the girl cannot conceivably cross the river, a closer secondary school is Bedlington Academy, which has not been able to gain a place at that school. Her parents don't wish her to attend her next nearest school, which is a faith school, and as such, she is out of education, awaiting a place at the academy. So these are the issues which are really, really important to families and children at the early stages. We've spent a lot of time trying to help a kid from Stakeford, again having gone through the Academy's former feeder schools, and he's been unable to obtain a place. He's an incredibly bright young fella, but he's currently 6 months out of any formal education setting. And we cannot just continue. And one of the reasons why this debate's happening is to ask the Minister for some sort of support in South East Northumberland. His next nearest school is the oversubscribed Ashington Academy, so is forced to choose from options, again, further afield. These two children aren't alone. Indeed, we are aware that Bedlington Academy is oversubscribed for the next academic year by more than 20 pupils. I've previously alluded to the fact of former feeder schools, and in 2020 the school admissions criteria of both Ashington and Bedlington Academies, both run by the North East Learning Trust, were amended. And rather than using feeder schools in the oversubscription criteria, they changed that to using the distance from the school as the determining factor. Now, under usual circumstances, this could at first glance be seen as a reasonable change and one which is entirely legal under legislation. But it should be noted, however, that this was against the then advice of the local education authority, Northumberland County Council, as was North East Learning Trust's decision to cut the number of places available each year in both of their academies. But there are more issues at play in the local area that cause problems. Ashington and Bedlington are towns containing two secondary schools. In Ashington, there was traditionally a split down the middle of the town which decided which school children attended. One side, you were at the Church of England, the other side, you're at the Ashington Academy. And children from the surrounding villages were split between the two schools, with those from Newbiggin and Linemouth attending one, and those from Pegwood, Linton, Ellington and Uffham the other. The change in oversubscription criteria alone would have made very little difference, but combined with different outcomes for the children there's a swell in the number of pupils seeking to attend Ashington Academy. Ashington Academy is in the centre of the town. Its results now, as I've mentioned twice already, are very much on the increase. Therefore, there's more people who want to go there from the semi-urban areas and indeed from Ashington itself. So every child in Ashington, regardless of where, lives closer to Ashington Academy than a child from Pegwood or indeed the other villages. So the people who've travelled to Ashington Academy from Pegwood, from Linton, from Ellington, now are having fewer options to travel there, because people in Ashington town who live closer, who perhaps went to the other school, they live closer, and that means that the criteria for admission is in their favour. And again in Bedlington, whilst again the two schools, the traditional split between them is slightly more complex due to one of the schools being a Catholic academy. But parents from wider Bedlandshire are now increasingly finding parental choices unavailable to them too. Children in Stakeford, Choppington, Guipehurst, East and West Sleekburn, Camas and North Blythe are at a disadvantage in attending their closest secondary school because they live too far away. And perversely, though I'm not aware of any cases yet, there will come a time when even children living in Bedlington itself could find attending the closest known faith secondary school difficult, with parts of Blythe closer in distance to the school than parts of Bedlington. There is some positive news for those wishing to attend the Ashton Academy next year, as the school has been able to increase their admissions to ensure that all those who have been chosen as their first choice can get in. So we've made a little bit of progress thanks to Leslie Powell and her team at the North East Learning Trust. It doesn't help those who have been forced out of their traditional school progression in previous years, nor potentially, unless something can be sorted, will it help anyone in the future. Bedlington Academy, however, hasn't such luxuries. The school operates in a purpose-built facility but it's restricted due to size. There's simply very little option for them to adopt a similar route without building work. And data building work, and obviously building work means more investment into the academy, something which the North East Learning Trust have been seeking, but up till now it hasn't been agreed from the Education Authority. But the data from the local authority for children in the Bedlington school system shows that the problem is likely to subside in coming years. So people believe that in coming years it might change for the better, but this doesn't really take into account any other factors. The progress made in recent years at both Ashton and Bedlington academies is absolutely remarkable. Their reputation is so transformed that parents are desperate to get their children into the schools. And regardless of any other factors, this is likely to continue to see the schools oversubscribed, and children from more distant villages, for whom previously these were the appropriate schools, being split up from their peers, then pushed into secondary schools that are even further away from than the Ashton and the Bedlington academies. As the MP for the area for more than a decade, I've deliberately sought not to interfere in planning issues with no formal role in the process. I think it's been, by and large, a sensible decision. But I've been told on multiple occasions that the explosion of house building in the constituency will have no impact on local services. Specifically, I've been told that there isn't an issue with school places, and shown figures after figures after figures, which supposedly have proven that. But with the benefit of hindsight, this doesn't appear to have been correct. There's no wonder that local people are angry with the failure of local services to keep up. It is then that children who are forced to deal with the consequences. The role of the local authority in all of this is severely weakened by the academisation of so many schools in the area, where once they would have had the responsibility to act to ensure fairness, they are now left to pick up the pieces. The warning that Northumberland County Council officers made to the Academy Trust, the Nelt Academy Trust in 2020, were not heeded, and they have no powers to do anything in response. So that's a huge difficulty. We've got a part of the academy chain, the North East Learning Trust, setting the rules. It's being agreed. They're not doing anything illegally, and then the county council are advising them that shouldn't be the case. They're not listening to what the evidence is from the county council, and we've got kids falling through the cracks. So there's nobody doing anything wrong here. It's just not working for a number of young people, and it's set to get worse. You know, where once they would have had the responsibility, that's a local authority, to act and ensure fairness, as I said before, they're left to pick up the pieces. Council officers have concluded that the Trust's change in admission policy disrupted long-established educational pathways, causing much confusion. Students and their families have been left upset and uncertain. The report that the students are being forced to go to schools outside of the communities and away from long-standing friends and often involving long, unacceptable journeys. I understand that the council officials have met with the North East Learning Trust on an annual basis to try to convince them that the distance criteria is unfair and causing hardship. They sometimes are able, in their words, to wrestle some additional places in order to assist some students. But the distance criteria continues to disadvantage many, especially those in the villages in the former catchment areas that are the furthest away. Since 2010, austerity has ravished parts of my constituency. Some areas have seen child poverty go through the roof. Schools clearly have not escaped this, with funding cuts being patched up by the commitment of staff. They still remain as shining beacons of opportunity in our communities, but for too many, they're now unable to be accessed. Opportunity must be there for everyone. And I want to end by just posing a number of questions to the Minister. I wonder if the Minister understands that the changes made by basically the stroke of a pen to decades of settled school progression is incredibly hard for a community to take. And would you agree that any system where parental choice is possible for people in Ashington, but less so for those in the villages around it, is unfair? Does the Minister agree it's unfair that parental choice for some parents in Bedlingtonshire now amounts to choosing a school devoted to a faith which they do not belong, or a school in a community where they have no connections at all? And does the Minister agree with me that additional funding to Bedlington Academy to increase its capacity appears to be the only real option? And finally, does the Minister agree with me more rigorous checks on the impact of development need to be in place, and that they should be revisited year on year so the pupil, the students, the kids are first, second and third? Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered access to education in South East Northumberland, and since there are no other members that I can see wishing to speak, I'll leave the opposition spokesman to speak.
Thank you, Ms Henderson. It's certainly a pleasure to serve under your chairship today, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate, and on behalf of my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle upon Tyne North. I do want to also start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Wansbeck, on this very important debate about access to education in his constituency and across South East Northumberland. His speech and the issues he's raised are certainly ones that will resonate with members of Parliament across the country in relation to their own communities. And indeed, he speaks with passion and with eloquence about the difficulties being faced by children, families and schools in his region. It is also worth saying I want to pay tribute to him on the passion with which he is speaking up for the needs of children and young people in his constituency and the quality of their education. He has focused much on parental choice and engagement, indeed recognising that learning and barriers to engagement are having real impact, and there are consequences of structural and other policy changes within our public services and our education system on opportunity and equality. And he speaks with a deep knowledge of the circumstances in his local area and what has resulted from changes that have been made and the way that they have been made. The reality is also that children, students, teachers and parents in South East Northumberland and across the country have been let down in cumulative ways as well by the failures in so many respects of the Conservative government over the last 14 years, and that is in our schools as well as in our infrastructure, and thinking also about the local authorities with councils and their budgets really stripped to the bone, reducing their capacity and resilience as well. He's raised the concerning issue of parents and children not getting into schools of their choice. And I think we will all recognise that parental choice is very important when it comes to education. Issues can arise, as the Honourable Member set out, and he's talked about this in the case studies that he's highlighted, with impact when year groups and friendships can be split, and in cases where children are having to travel a much greater distance just to attend school. And it is concerning to hear of students in his constituency who he suggests have been left out of education due to a lack of choice. And I know that the Minister will be sympathetic to some of the challenges that have been outlined and certainly give the response from the government in terms of what can be done for those students. On the Honourable Member's main areas of concern as well, we know that nationally, because of fragmentation in admission policy making, some schools have had policies which effectively can then be prioritising high-achieving students and excluding disadvantaged pupils. And it is important to ensure there is more democratic control and oversight over the admissions system. And it is the reason why we have said that Labour wants to require all schools, including academies, to cooperate with their local authorities on pupils' admissions and place planning, and ensuring fairer access and greater certainty for children and their families. And I will look forward to hearing from the Minister on this, and I'm sure points that he will want to raise. I also want to make reference to other areas that do affect access to education in South East Northumberland, and which the Honourable Member has referenced extremely effectively. He did reference students with special educational needs and the difficulties that they are facing. We know that the system isn't working, and he has set out the impacts that families face because they aren't getting the support that they need. And those issues around SEND we know need to be a priority for much greater priority for the government. And we do have a system that we see in all of our constituencies is currently beyond breaking point. Too many families face an uphill battle for the support their children need, often a battle that must be fought multiple times across a child's school life, for support in primary school, then to find the right secondary school and ensure that support is put in place, and then again for places and support in further or higher education. This leaves huge pressures on the system, and we have seen this, I know, across Northumberland, but also across the country. In councils across the country, we have seen SEND cited as a reason contributing to the issuing of Section 114 notices, local authorities struggling to balance their budgets with reduced resilience in their finances for all sorts of reasons, and indeed more coming out to light of the impact of the former Prime Minister's budget in her just over 40 days in office, and the impact that is having on council finances. But what has been the response of the government to the situation? Well, on SEND, a review was announced in 2019, but also delayed 3 times, and much of the SEND and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan won't come into effect until next year, 6 years after it was announced. And the Minister may want to enlighten us as to whether any of that will be brought forward, because we know it's desperately needed in all of our communities. On child poverty, let me say a few words here as well, because this, alongside the impact of the cost of living crisis, was highlighted by my honourable friend. The impact of child poverty on access to education in South East Northumberland and across the country should concern us all. We know that the challenges children face at home don't stop at the school gates, and the extent of poverty in the North East is appalling. And some of the challenges and the way the impact has been demonstrated in those who are leaving school without any qualifications at all as well. Indeed, in the North East, we've seen the steepest rise in child poverty anywhere in the UK, with almost 190,000 babies and children and young people living below the poverty line. We hear about dedicated people across our education system going above and beyond every day for our children, for those who don't have books to read or pens to draw with or enough food in their bellies when they're going to school every day. But of course, it is the government's role to break down those barriers, and instead it feels like decisions made are often making those barriers even higher. And the last Labour government was laser-focused, Mr Henderson, on tackling child poverty, and it is what the next Labour government will do too. We also know about the challenges with persistent absence in our schools, and across the autumn and spring terms this year, over 1 in 5 children were persistently absent from schools, more than double the number from just 5 years ago. And all this while the Education Secretary continues to claim that it's her #1 priority. The North East has seen huge increases in the number of children missing days of their education, with a 169% increase in the number of children missing half, and I say that again, half of their lessons across Northumberland between 2016 and 2022. The figures are starker yet in Sunderland, Newcastle and County Durham, and we know that this is just not good enough. The Honourable Member also raised the devastating impact of school funding cuts in his constituency. We do know that under the Conservatives, per pupil spending in schools will only recover to 2010 levels in 24-25. These are official figures. And that is 14 lost years. The Minister, if he's not familiar with those figures, may want to look at the official figures because that is the case. I've heard from school students in my own constituency as well who have been left without a maths teacher for an entire year as teachers are leaving the profession as well. We're seeing currently now English classes, as young people told me last week, double so that classes are being combined and in the school hall in order to cope with teacher shortages. And I will just say a word on access to post-16 education, because the decline of accessibility in education under the Conservatives isn't just limited to schools. And under their watch, apprenticeship starts have plummeted by over 200,000. In the North East, starts have fallen by 45%, and in Wansbeck by almost 40% since 2010. Schools and colleges seem to be an afterthought, but under a Labour government we know this would need to be at the heart of our mission to break down barriers to opportunity at every stage. And that will also mean recruiting 6,500 more teachers across our schools, because we know that the shortage of teachers is also impacting the way in which schools are able to recruit and provide the subjects to ensure a wider range of the curriculum as well, and indeed to expand their offers. And it also means that we need to see, in order to create opportunity, that 1,000 new careers advisors and 2 weeks' worth of work experience that we know will be vital to make sure that we're bridging that gap between education and employment that's so important for the quality of education that all young people are receiving. So just to conclude, Mr Henderson, the Labour Party wants to see high and rising standards in all of our schools and across all of our communities, so that every child everywhere is getting the chance to thrive and to benefit from the opportunities that flow from the best education available and the best access to that education available. And not just for some schools and some children, but for every child in every community. That's why I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the speech that he has made today, for the issues that he has outlined for his constituency, which are absolutely reflected in constituencies across the country. And it is why the next Labour government will be focused on breaking down barriers to opportunity in South East Northumberland and across the country. Thank you.
Minister, over to you.
Thank you, Mr Henderson. May I say what a great pleasure it is to see you in the chair on this auspicious day. I believe your maiden chairing of Westminster Hall. So there is a privilege for all of us who are here to be a part of it. And may I congratulate the honourable gentleman who represents Wansbeck on his passionate and comprehensive remarks today on access to education in his area. And the government is committed, as as you will know, Mr Henderson, to making sure every child in the country has a first-class education and every opportunity to make the most of their abilities. We're also committed to ensuring fair access to a good school place for every child, including, of course, the most vulnerable. And that's why we've taken steps to ensure that schools allocate places in a clear, fair and objective way. Now, all state-funded schools, including academies, are required, as the Honourable Gentleman will know, to comply with the School Admissions Code. And in 2021, a new code came into effect, which aims to improve access to school for vulnerable children and to reduce any gaps in their education. The latest data available show the admission system is working well. Nationally, in 2023, 94% of parents received an offer of a place at one of their top 3 preferences for secondary schools, and 98% an offer at one of their top 3 preferences for primary. And that matches 2022, so we're maintaining that high level. Anyone who thinks the school's admission arrangements are unlawful or unfair can object to the school's adjudicator. The adjudicator's decision is then legally binding. If a school fails to meet its statutory duties, it can be directed to do so by the Secretary of State. Now, I understand the Honourable Gentleman and his constituents, of course, will be concerned when children and young people are unable to attend the parents' preferred choice of local school. And the Department does work closely with local authorities and with admission authorities on exactly these matters. Overall, in 2023, in Northumberland, 99% of parents received an offer at one of their top 3 preferences for secondary, and 93% were offered their first preference. And that compares to 94% nationally for top 3 and 82.5% for first preference. So the Northumberland rates are above the national average. As he will know, academy trusts are themselves, they are their own admissions authority, but we do expect local authorities and schools, academy trusts and diocesan authorities all to work together to ensure there is a coordinated approach which helps local areas meet, and the local authorities specifically, to meet the duty on place sufficiency. I do, though, of course, recognise the frustration of parents and carers living in South East Northumberland who may now be less sure about their child's chance of accessing a place at their school of choice due to the Academy's change of admission criteria in 2020 that, as the Honourable Gentleman rightly identified, considers distance from the Academy rather than attendance at specific feeder schools. Now, distance is not an uncommon criterion to use. In fact, it is a very common criterion to use in admissions criteria. And of course, it does ensure that children living close to the school can access their local school and avoid travelling longer distances. Data provided by the local authority indicate that the number of Year 7 pupils in the area will decrease over the current forecast period up to 2029. And just for colleagues' sort of wider background, there is a general effect going on in the demography of the country. It's not exactly the same everywhere. There are different patterns in different communities, but where there has been what's called a bulge, not the most elegant term, but a bulge of pupils coming through primary school who are now going to secondary school. Secondary school initially will grow, and primary numbers overall will tend to come down somewhat. And then over time, that effect will work its way through secondary school as well. The long and the short of that is to say that one would expect that in Year 7 admissions, those numbers will change over the years ahead. The local authority is reporting that there are sufficient physical places to meet demand. I do accept in some cases there are places, these would be places lower down in preference due to established patterns of travel, oversubscription criteria of some schools, or where a school is continuing its improvement journey, and we'll do all we can to speed up this improvement so there is genuine choice in local areas. The Honourable Gentleman asked me to reflect, to respond to some specific points, some of which I've covered in my remarks already. Let me just say overall on school choice, we all want the best for our children. All parents want the best for their children. And in any system where there is school choice, there is a degree of not quite everybody gets their first choice. That's been the that is a byproduct of there being that choice. But we also think that overall, and I think this was the policy indeed of the previous government prior to 2010 as well. We believe that having that choice to make as a parent to make your preferred selections of school in a ranked order does also carry great benefits including for families and children themselves. He asked specifically about housing development, and local authorities do make projections of birth rates, of the effect they expect from rates of housing development, so depending on the type of housing it is, how many families with children there's likely to be, and what age those children are likely to be. And I'm sure his authority in Northumberland will do that as well. And on the PAN numbers that he referred to, of course, schools can and do change those PAN numbers over time, and he's right to identify that in the particular case we're talking about today, those admission numbers were reduced. That was part, of course, of the school improvement plan to give some greater headroom. And that improvement, as he rightly said, has in fact been happening in those schools, and we've been seeing better results. It's also, I gather, true that the trust has been allowing some admission over the PAN number, which has been of some assistance. The Honourable Lady who speaks for the opposition took the debate in some, let's say, some wider areas beyond just talking specifically about South East Northumberland, but it does give me an opportunity to respond to some of those points, and so I'm grateful to her. I mean, she mentioned having to provide for school choice, and I agree entirely. That's why we have created over 1 million new places in the school system since 2010, specifically to make sure there isn't only adequate numbers, but that school choice is facilitated. And that stands in contrast to the 100,000, of course, that were cut in the years leading up to 2010. It is the case that there is now the highest funding there has been in schools. She also spoke about attendance, and she's quite right to identify that we have an issue right now with school absence, and particularly with persistent absence. It's an issue we share, by the way, with most other countries in the world. Certainly we share it with the other countries in the United Kingdom, including where other political parties are in control, but actually much, much more broadly than that. We found during COVID there was an adverse impact on some, not just directly connected with COVID, obviously, but in the aftermath of it, and that has been difficult to work through. Very understandably, of course, no one's blaming parents for this, but some attitudes to what's the sort of threshold at which to stay home from school if you are under the weather have moved a little bit. We are trying to change those attitudes back so we get back to where we were pre-COVID, and there has been progress. So if we look at the autumn term just finished, absence was markedly lower actually than it had been in the autumn term a year before, but we know there is further to go, and we continue to work on it. She also spoke about wider questions around society and around income levels and the effect on children. She will know that we have extended eligibility for free school meals much more widely than previous government did, such that where in the past, when her party was in government, 1 in 6 children were in receipt of free school meals. Now it's 1 in 3. And that comes at a time, of course, when the number of children in workless households has come down markedly, down by 600,000 since 2010, and at a time when of those who are in work, the proportion who are on low pay, as a result of the national living wage, has come down very significantly as well. We've also invested heavily in breakfast clubs, in the holiday activities and food fund and more. We've made 5 major extensions to early years and childcare entitlement, and there is a 6th very big extension currently on its way. And in higher education, the opportunities there for people from lower income backgrounds to attend university are greater than they have ever been before. She even touched on apprenticeships, which I was surprised about. I can tell her that apprenticeships have been totally overhauled and reformed, modern apprenticeships that are designed by employers with proper end assessments and the introduction of T-levels, with that very, very substantial industrial work placement at the centre of it, and the English, the maths, the digital, more hours in college, and again, designed and certified by employers. These are materially increasing the life chances of children taking both the vocational and the academic routes. And we see the results, Mr. Henderson, in things like the PISA comparisons of international performance in education, where in the period from 1997 to 2010, although ostensibly results domestically looked like they were improving, in fact, on the international comparisons, we were coming down. And since 2010, we have come back up. I would be delighted to hear from the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I don't propose to come back on all the points that he's raised, but suffice to say, I think the poverty and the challenges, the cost of living crisis, and the impact of the sustained impact of austerity is having a huge impact on children and families, and it has been a cumulative impact over many years. But could I just ask him this point firstly on the apprenticeships? They have been dropping over the last since 2017, since the impact of the levy as it's been implemented, and SME engagement has dropped by 49% with apprenticeships. Those are official figures as well since 2016. So, does he also agree that it is important in terms of a good quality education that we are looking at the sustained engagement of employers and tackling the barriers that there are? It's important to recognise they do exist rather than pretending there isn't a problem.
Mr. Henderson, when the Labour Party were in government, there were many people on apprenticeships who, when asked in a survey about their apprenticeship, didn't know they were on an apprenticeship. And that is the change we have made, because apprenticeships now have proper quality. They are designed by employers. They have minimum length. They have minimum time in college. And yes, the apprenticeship levy is a landmark reform which underpins that. It gets rid of the free rider problem, which has been forever an issue throughout industry and investment in training. And now we have, I think, a most brilliant generation of apprentices coming through. I think now up to 70% of trades, of occupations are available on apprenticeship, including now the teaching degree apprenticeship. I think these are fantastic achievements that have been made, and I do hope her party will turn their backs on what they seem to be saying, which is that they're going to cut the number of apprenticeships and not committed to that system going forward. But Mr. Henderson, we digress, and I wish to come back directly to the honourable gentleman who represents Wansbeck and thank him again for bringing this important matter to the floor of Westminster Hall today, and to all those who have contributed today. The vast majority of secondary schools in South East Northumberland are part of strong academy trusts. They provide a good standard of education, where there are improvements still to be made. We work closely with schools, with academy trusts and with local authorities to provide support and challenge to ensure that standards are raised. Ashington Academy became a sponsored academy after being judged inadequate by Ofsted. It was judged good at its first inspection as an academy in 2022 and now performs significantly higher than the national average, therefore improving the life chances of its students. I'd like to express my sincere thanks to all those working to secure strong outcomes for children and young people, including the provision of high-quality school places in Northumberland and across our country. My officials will continue to monitor place planning issues in the local area and will engage with his local authority and with the Academy Trust to ensure there is fair access to good school places, which is something he and I know all of us here, care passionately about.
Thank you. We appear to have 1 or 2 minutes. Does Ian Lavery want to wind up?
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. Henderson. Again, I'd like to thank everybody who's made a contribution. I think the point's been well made here. And, you know, we're talking about children here, and I'm an MP, like most MPs, if not all MPs, who want to see children in their constituencies, children generally across the UK, given the best possible opportunities. The same opportunities of what people have got up and down the length and the breadth of the country. I feel like that probably isn't the case in my constituency, and I'll fight till the very day, not the MP, and after that, of course, to make sure that we look after these kids. We do live in a very impoverished area, and it has got an impact. And both my honourable friend from Northumberland Heston mentioned that, as did my honourable friend from Hemsworth, mentioned the impact all of this has got in terms of poverty in our regions. And it is desperate. The schools I mentioned are mainly in very much socially deprived areas. And I just think the parents deserve to get the best they can absolutely achieve for their children. And I don't think that's the case. It's the academies and the academisation versus the state schools. The academies, and I think as a whole, the academies now are bartering to try and get more finance from the local authorities so they can increase the PAN numbers, more buildings, for example. I think there's like a bit of bartering, and then you've got the local authorities basically thinking, well, it's an academy, they're on their own, they should be able to accommodate this. And the people who suffered as a consequence are the kids in the middle. So I would... So see, the people in the middle, the children and the parents which are suffering, Minister, we've got to get the local authority, and this is probably the same up and down the country, you know, I've got to get the local authorities and the academies to bang their heads together so all the kids up and down the country get equal opportunity, for heaven's sake. And a massive thank you to the teaching staff for each of these schools, whether the schools are inadequate, whether the schools require improvement, whether they're good, whether they're outstanding. The work the teachers are currently doing in the schools, certainly in my constituency, is absolutely brilliant. I've been to every single school, I speak with the teachers, and I think that they do a remarkable job, bearing in mind the current circumstances. So, thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered access to education in South East Northumberland. As many are, as of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. Sorry? Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
So we're suspended now till 4 o'clock. Okay.
Do I say that?
No, that's okay. Everyone knows, don't worry.